what you should be seeing on the screen now is the title of a book. And I first learned about that book I was doing my meditations, and sometimes the Spirit would say, check this video or that link. And so it has been quite a revelation to me how many things are there waiting to be discovered. And so I discovered a video which was done by Wintley Phipps in several parts called Africa and the Bible. And it has now been taken down. And but I believe one can get it on video. And but the book itself is a book by a Japanese American, and his name is Edwin Masao Yamauchi, and he's a Christian editor and academic. He's professor emeritus of history at Miami University, where he taught from '69 until 2005. As you can see from the name and look, he's Japanese American. And so he has compiled in this book a monumental amount of research, and he backs up everything he says by his references, which are there in the book for anybody to see. And I will take a little time off to state that the way these days information is organized, even in this time of fake news, it is quite possible to know that you are arriving and that you are discovering what is established fact and the truth, not just by the qualifications of the persons, because one can be deceived by that, but by those, but you can see the references that the person makes. That is what Wikipedia has been doing. You go to a Wikipedia article, and although you can't believe everything, what they do is they say, listen, this article needs its sources to be indicated, and you will see those sometimes in many parts, and then you see at the bottom what are the sources. So this gentleman has certainly littered his work with his sources, and not what I will refer to. What I will be sharing is not just from his book and his work. I will be sharing from several sources. As it turns out, there is no shortage of sources of this information. What I will also be disclosing to you, sharing with you, is that there seems to have been a definite project, a program, to keep this information as low-key as possible, as unbelievable as possible, so that those who consider that they have an interest in that ignorance can continue to benefit from it. Unfortunately, even persons who have an interest in knowing different, that is, many people of African descent, they don't even want to hear it because we have been all programmed. I have been represented as somebody who likes African culture, and I will tell you, although I was born on the 1st of August, not only did I grow up not even knowing what the bigger boys and girls were talking about when they say Master D done, because I didn't read the books that were like Kewana, the popular books by Guyanese author Kewana, Blood and Kewana stuff that they were reading. I never knew anything about those things. And when I went to UG, I didn't do, at that time there was the choice between Caribbean history and world history, European history, and African history as well. And as far as I was concerned, Africa had no history. I had been taught that way, programmed that way. And so I had to be brought by the scruff of my neck to understand that not only did Africa have a history, but that every other history comes out of Africa, but that's another story. So I'm saying that to say that no, I'm not a historian. I was not conditioned that way. In fact, I didn't even realize certain things, but I was brought, and especially by the Christian faith, to realize that I really needed a reconditioning of my mind. So let's go to the next slide. And all this screen is saying is that there's a decade of people of African descent declared by the United Nations. Okay, and that decade began about just over 5 years ago. So this is the 6th year. We're just over the middle of it. And so such a presentation, one would think, is overdue in the church. And when I say the church, I mean the body of Christ. But as far as I know, the church has done nothing to little And this is the middle of it. So why did the UN decide to set a whole decade? Because it seeks to overcome historical injustices and accelerate development for communities of African descent who remain marginalized, stuck in poverty, and frequently victims of discrimination. So when this decade was announced and declared, there was no Floyd murder. And it seems as though the decade is passing by with stuff like that continuing to happen. And one can only hope that the purpose of the decade begins to get some kind of a boost from this sudden consciousness that appears to be happening as a result of that incident. But the point is that the United Nations correctly discerned that there was need for help for people of African descent, and they declared a whole decade for it. And the people who did that, who agreed on that, were not just people of African descent, clearly not, because it is the United Nations. So we go to slide number 3. And so, as it says, there's a lot of damage. That's a whole decade. There's a lot of damage, a lot of repair needed. And I'm mentioning that colorism is prejudice against people who have darker skin tone, and or the preferential treatment of those who are of the same race but lighter skinned. That is part of the problem. As you can see from the fact that even in Nigeria, going to the next slide, too many people have bought into that lie that something is wrong with their skin. But there's a whole lot of white investment made in this view, and the Bible has been used to promote this view. I don't expand on that very much because I don't know we have time for that, but I am referring to the fact that for generations, Black people have heard the church, the mainly white church, interpret the Bible, the curse of Ham, to mean that that is why Black people's skin is black. And that has been a great error. But that has been propagated. Unfortunately, there are people who are not African. There are people who, including white people, who have, yes, Alex, who have come up to correct that misimpression. So why do we need a revision in our thinking? Going to the next slide. Number one, young people are noticing more than ever that the pictures on the internet of biblical people seem to be always white. They are asking questions. And if you've ever gone out on the road to share, and if you've ever had young African boys tell you that Islam is their religion and they're not interested in Christianity, you will understand this point. And then, of course, we have in Guyana, as well as in other parts of the world, what is called the Hebrew Israelite Church. So that religion, as we have known it, is not the same. And people, young people are asking questions, and we have not been responding. We, the people, the elders, and the preachers of the church have not been responding as we ought to. And most likely, if that continues, we are going to lose even those people who are thinking young people. This gentleman, so you can see that slide is just to back up the point I'm making. As you can see from his presentation on the internet, what he is saying, what is his message that he has. Black people must leave the Christian church. So I only use that slide to back up the point that I have made. So on this next slide, slide 8, what you see there is the and one of the plaques, the awards that are given by the British, that only on July 1st, 3 days ago, Jamaica has suspended the use of this badge. Why? Because it represents one of the highest British royal honors, And the anti-racism protesters have decried its imagery, because if you look on this badge, what you are seeing is a white angel standing on Satan who is painted black. And the Jamaican anti-racist group have objected correctly to this, of course. And so people are beginning to become conscious. They're not only want to pull down statues of the old imperialists who have benefited from slavery, but they're looking at stuff like this. And these are things that they're in our literature, in our faces, but for some people they don't notice. Well, that is one of the latest positions you're seeing. So what I want to do now is to take you now to a gentleman who is going to give you a certain perspective on what Christians are facing. This gentleman is an Egyptian, and he is, as it says there, he's fighting the US government to get him classified as a black person, and he'll tell you why he has had to fight like that. Now,
I am a black Egyptian. My father is much darker than I am. My mother is lighter than I am. In Egypt, people are identified by the religion first, not the race. So in Egypt, if you are Christian, you are a minority person. But if you're black, you're not a minority person. You are a part of the mainstream society. And I came from this background. And in Egypt, you identify as Arab and as Muslim. And in this country, when I first came, I identified myself as Arab American and Muslim first. And gradually, I became to identify myself as black. I came to the US in 1978. And I became a US citizen in 1985. When I became a US resident, I was told by the Immigration and Naturalization that I am white. And I told them that I'm black, and they said, no, in this country, you are white. All Arabs in this country, all Arab immigrants are white. I didn't pay much attention in the beginning to this, because in the Arab world, we identify with our ethnicity first as Arabs, and then with the race second as black or white or whatever. But in this country, you identify with your racial group first and then with your ethnicity second. Gradually, I became black first and Arab second. And I rejected my white classification publicly for the first time in 1987, in February, as a panelist in a function sponsored by the Association of the Study of Black Life and History in Detroit. I said that I belong to two minority groups. I am Arab American and Black American, and I'm racially black and ethnically Egyptian. I was harassed by my employer right after that. I work for a white school district. The superintendent is white. All the associate superintendents are white, even though that we provide services to 30% black population. But the organization is white and the approach is very white. The attitude towards me changed completely after I went out publicly and rejected my white classification. One coworker came to me and told me, a white coworker came to me and told me right after the function that he met with the superintendent, and if I don't keep my mouth shut, my educational career is over. He said, you have nothing to do with these people. You have a history and a culture. These people came from the jungle. You have nothing to do with them. These people lie and steal. When I see one of them in my neighborhood, I call the police. And I was told by the director of general education, who is retired now, in '88, I was told by him that I get people angry when I say that I'm black Egyptian. If I just say that I'm Egyptian, I would get along. I have to add that I was denied promotion twice because I chose black classification. This is part of my 2 lawsuits against my employer, which are currently pending, 2 lawsuits.
Now, just for the education of our viewership, why don't you share with us a breakdown of Egypt as it is today, insofar as blacks or combinations thereof of European descent and what have you?
We don't have Egyptians of European descent in Egypt. We have a population which is basically a mixture of ancient Egyptian blacks who intermarried with Arabs right after the Arab conquest. The ancient Egyptian population was brown and black before the Arab conquest. But before the Arab conquest came the Greeks. it was ancient. The ancient Egyptian population was in Egypt for thousands of years. The ancient Egyptian population was brown and black, and the Greeks came in 300 BC, and they started to intermarry with the local population, and then the Romans came and ruled from 70 BC until they were conquered by the Arabs and kicked out by the Arabs in the 7th century. And these people intermarried with the Egyptian Copts, and they made the pigmentation of the Egyptians, the Copts, much lighter because of this intermarriage with Europeans.
Now, you're an educator, okay? Now, how do you deal with situations when you practice your profession insofar as dealing with the mythology or the misconceptions about Egypt being a white civilization? How do you deal with that?
This is a big problem because Egypt, the ancient Egyptian civilization was a black civilization, and ancient Egyptians were black according to the Greek scholars and the Roman scholars. Ancient Egypt became white only in the 19th century and in the 20th century. And the scholar who is responsible for this is Seligman, the noted anthropologist from England, Seligman. White supremacy argues that blacks are inferior than white intellectually. They are subhuman and they are incapable of building a civilization. White supremacy had one dilemma until Seligman came. The dilemma was ancient Egypt was black according to the Greek and the Roman scholars. 10 of them said that, including Aristotle and Plato. 10 of them said that in writing. They had this dilemma. Ancient Egyptian was black. So if blacks are inferior intellectually and are incapable of building a civilization, how come the ancient Egyptians built a civilization? Seligman found the solution for this dilemma. He came up with a theory called the Hamite theory. He separated the blacks who built a civilization in Egypt and Ethiopia from the rest of the black race, and he called them brown-skinned whites, or the Hamites. So Seligman saved white supremacy from this dilemma, and all the white scholars followed him from that time on. This was at the end of the 19th century. And since that time, white scholarship says that ancient Egypt is white.
Mustafa Hefni is currently working on his doctorate degree at Wayne State University. His dissertation topic is a content analysis of the treatment of ancient Egypt in world history textbooks. And just how far is this determined Egyptian willing to go to be classified black?
I want to carry my case all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court if necessary.
Wonderful. So I want to, while the slide is changing, hopefully it will change without much of a problem, yes. I just need to hear that you're hearing my voice. Can somebody cough or say something? Are you hearing me? Did you hear that presentation?
Everything yes, I heard well. It.
Yes. Wonderful. Great. Now,
yes, loud and clear.
Note well what Mr. Hefni said. Oh, by the way, he's gotten his doctorate by now. That video was in 2009. What he said, listen, when you come from Egypt, you are told at the airport that you are a white person. And he was told that he is not to classify himself as black. He said, what they do in the States. Those people come from the jungle. He's not them. And when they see him, when they see one, they call the police. So you're getting an understanding of the structural racism and how deep is this structure that the Floyd murder comes out of. And you are also getting some information in terms of what is this project that white academia had about Egypt. Why are they so obsessed with Egypt? But the Bible it is very clear on who the Egyptians are, because the Bible says very clearly, as you will see later on, that Egypt is the brother of Cush, and sometimes I get it confused. I don't pretend to be an expert, so if anybody is going to correct me, I'll accept correction, but I will go to the passage. And so the Ethiopians, as you will see later on, and oh, notice that he said the Greeks, how long they were there, and what is said, the Greeks and the Romans identified Egyptian society as black, and that was the basis of the problem that they of white supremacy had. And so I'm saying that to draw to your attention that the Greeks knew what they were talking about. They wrote who they saw. And they were the ones who first used the term Ethiopian to describe curly-haired black people. So I bear that in mind.